Okay, friends, welcome. This is week 2, lecture 3, and we are in the thick of it. We are going to do a MERN speed run. Not really. In all actuality, I do anticipate this going over. As always, if you have, something after, this hour that you have to leave to, I fully get it. There is no requirement for you to be here. I probably will go over, as always, it's recorded. So if you need it, that is available for you. As always, I like to sort of give you a understanding of exactly what we're doing before we do it. Some of you guys have said that that really helps, so I want to do that. Here we've got our normal app, something that we looked at yesterday, forms. I have a form here, and what we're going to do is we're going to build in a couple things. First, we're going to build in some validations. That way we can have some validations that lets our user know this is what they need to do. Now, this is going to be a very basic level validation. Actually, there's going to be 2 validation types that we're doing, but it's going to let them know, okay, title must be at least 3 characters. So I can say, cool, Top Gun. I'm going to say genre is going to be, I don't know, action. We're going to build a little movie app. Release year is going to be 2022, and tickets sold is like a bajillion, right? So then once I add this, yesterday, what we did is we just added it and console logged it, which is fine, but it's kind of lame. So we're going to move to the next step is where we add it and we actually can see this information here. And yesterday, if you noticed, or if you remember, when we pressed, when we submitted our form, all the information stayed here. So we're actually going to build in the functionality to get the information over here. And then we're going to clear this information here. Now, that doesn't seem like a big deal, but under the hood, we are changing a whole bunch of things. If you do ever get sort of lost, if you are following along, as always, there's code that you can follow. I've already put the solution code onto the on a GitHub. So if you are looking for that, the solution code for this and how we're going to build this is on GitHub, but it's going to look very different. So if you, I would encourage you to follow along because there's a lot of things I want to go ahead and walk through. Cool. Great. Now let's go ahead and jump in to actually what we're doing today. Let me clear this. Let me get in the right space, and then we can get to the correct lecture. Oh my goodness. CD to lecture 3 in class. Okay. Okay. So very different than what we just saw. We've got something different where if this is sort of our old code. So what we did yesterday, where if I just put in Top Gun action, we're going to say 2022 and all of the tickets. If I do this, if we look at our console, we see that we console logged it here. And if we go into our code, we will be able to see that, right? We see that with my movie component. Here, all we did, this is basically, I just transformed what we did yesterday into this movie form, where what we did is we have our state. We have every single piece or every single aspect of our form has some state. We have this submit handler. All it does is prevent default. And then it console logs what we're doing. Cool. We know that. Before I jump in, just as a quick reminder, because I just remembered I didn't do this. Our discussion questions are due Sunday. I looked and some of you guys have not done them. So please make sure that you do them. You have 3 core assignments due on Sunday as well, putting together hook forms, more forms. And then again, I've already put that GitHub link in the class. If you guys just joined after, Gray, or somebody can copy and paste it there as well. But okay, let's jump into it. We have this form, and just so you know, for looking at sort of what we're doing today, make it look nicer. What we're doing today is we're actually going to do a form walkthrough and reformatting. I know I said we're going to do dot map and filter and filter today. We might get there. I'm assuming that we're going to get there because we're going to use this in order to show that. And we're going to talk some validations. What I will say, though, is in looking at the class, the thing that's going to be the most important, and even just for you as developers, is for you to really understand what we're going to do up here. The ternary operator, not as much. It's kind of a cool little thing we can do, but the validation function, the new way of how we're going to do state, how we're going to hold that information and show it on the screen, how we're going to sort of reformat how we set everything up. That's going to be way more important than something like a dot map or dot filter. Those are things that on the platform are already sort of explained. And those are things that is very, very easy to go and find, like a free code camp article of like, what's the difference between dot map and for each. Again, I'm going to talk about it. And I also have the code. I did try to write out as much code as I can in case I can't be super in depth with it. I have this code. You guys already have access to this. This map and filter. Here's a for each definition in words. If you are interested and want to know when we run this function, what exactly is happening, here's what JavaScript is doing. Is it's calling our array dot prototype dot for each function, and it's doing this, right? And so I have that with an example. I've got that for map example. I've got it for filter, same thing. And then I have some other examples of what we can do with map and filter, which are the kind of the two main ones that we're going to deal with here. Cool. We're also going to talk about high order functions, and we're going to talk about callback functions, which gratefully Gray, if you were in the office hour, Gray also talked about these. So that is all here as well. So again, I tried to go super in depth in building this so that way you guys have access if there's something that's not necessarily, clicking, then hopefully there's enough there. Somebody asked real quickly, what does this array.prototype.for each? I'm going to talk about that. Mainly what that is whenever we have some sort of array. So we have some sort of array and we say array, we'll call it, movie list is an array. And we're going to say movie list dot for each, right? We are calling a function from the class of array. So every single class that's sort of a higher level, we do the same thing like, array.length, array.for each, array.map, array. Whatever it is, movie list.for each, movie list.length. When we do that, basically this is what represents that movie list. And so we can basically, this is what's happening. I just wanted sort of the under the hood, so you understand the differences between for each and .map, but we'll get there. We'll talk through that if that's not making a ton of sense right now. It's really, instead of you just being like, oh, this is a function, a built-in function. Well, this is what the built-in function is doing. Remember, we've talked about how built-in functions are great because I don't have to write the code to tell it what to do. Well, this is the code that tells it what to do. So I just added that in. I thought it was fun. But if that is confusing to you at all, please do not worry about it. You can just do for each. Whenever you do for each, this is what it's doing under the hood. Cool. Now we have our movie component. Before I get started, any questions? Anything you guys have? Yeah. Thanks, Grant and Chris. If you guys are wanting to get more practice with map and filter, the object master is a great assignment for that. And then Kat deleted a message, but it was a really funny pun because everything was grayed out. So thanks, Kat. Though you deleted it, now it's recorded and everybody will always know. Okay. So we talked about, and if you guys remember that we have this guy right here, and we talked about session and being able to keep track of all of our information. And this is absolutely a way that we can do it. You can do it this way, and that will be just fine. You'll see this on the platform, but I do want to let you guys know that there is another way, and in my opinion, a little bit easier way for us to handle state, especially when we have something like a movie, right? Instead of this looking like this, here's a second way that we can accomplish the same exact thing. Cool. So I have my movie and know that we are trying to do some sort of, we've got movie and we want to have access to a movie title, movie genre, the release year, and the tickets sold. So instead of putting all of those in state, I can do something like this, const I can say movies, and then I can say set movies. Now, when I do that, see here that I just do state as these quotation marks, right? I see these, it's sort of set to an empty string. Now, what I can do instead of having them individually pieced is I can actually put them in a singular object where I've got this, actually don't need this as a list. So I've got this singular object. And what I will have is all of my different aspects that I want to do. Why did that do that? Sorry. Cool. So I'm going to have movie title. Then I can have my genre, my release year, and my tickets sold. So both of these will work. Now I'm going to have to approach them in a different way when I handle them, but both of these will work. Instead of me having to say movie title or genre or release year and basically destructuring or creating different ones, I can just say movies dot movie title to target that specific value. I can say movies dot genre dot release year and dot tickets sold. Both of these will be fine. Both of these are very okay. We'll just have to approach them in a different way. Any questions on sort of this destructuring? In my opinion, instead of having all of these different use states, this is a little bit easier. And if we look at it, it's still going to, ooh, what the heck happened? Oh, sorry. It's still going to show our state and it's still going to break down. It's still going to break down everything that we're doing, right? And if we look into our components tool and in our inspect, it's still going to have a state for movie title, a state for genre, a state for release year, and a state for tickets sold. So it still will allow them to be individualized, but this is a way that we can compact and package them together. In the worst case, or, you know, in this idea, one thing I want to note is if something, this is prior to our validations, even if somebody doesn't put anything, we have this default value that even if only the state changes here, these still have a default value of an empty string. So this is a really compact way in order to have our state in sort of, instead of destructuring our state, just have our state combined as a whole. Somebody asked a great chat in, or a great question in the chat that somebody asked, what are we going to do about setting and using the set movies function? We're going to get to that. And that's what we're going to do is we're actually going to have a different way of handling our setter and our getter, or here's our getter, but how we're going to use our setter. And this is what's going to allow, if you remember when I just showed the form, that once we do that, we can actually reset and reallow all of our states to go back to an empty string, but we can keep track of all that information. All that information. Cool. Can you guys put a 1 in the chat if this makes sense, or are there any questions on this? Again, now we're just creating a movies object instead of breaking them down one by one by one. Cool. Cool. So now what I want to do is I actually want to do some things with this information, because right now it will be fine, but I don't really care about just console logging. So let's go ahead and get rid of that. And now we can do a couple different things. Actually, before we do that, I want to talk about validations. Validations are a way that when we have a form, we can make sure that the data is not incorrect. The data is not broken. There is good data. And that's really important. Again, we talked a lot about how you could do like SQL injection and we can prevent stuff like that. But really it's because we don't want somebody to create a Facebook profile without a first name, right? Because maybe our entire product is dependent on this first name. If you want a friends list, or you have so many different pieces of your product, you have to make sure, no, this data is good and it's going to make the user experience good as well. Now, what we did is, or what we can do are two things. There is something called a ternary operator. And basically a ternary operator is just a fancy way. So I'm just gonna write ternary operator. Oops. Ternary operator is a fancy way of doing an if statement. So what I can do is if I want to inject some JavaScript within my form, all I have to do, because this is a JSX, is do my curly brackets. Now, if I wanted to just put 5 + 5 here, I could do that. I could, I can do anything within JavaScript as long as I have in my JSX file, I've got these curly brackets right here. What a ternary operator does is, man, this is way easier, so I'm just gonna do this, is it takes in a condition. As you have seen when it said if, parentheses, movie title length is less than 1, then enter in. What a ternary operator does is it just puts the condition first. Then it has a question mark. Now this question mark is basically us saying if, right? That is sort of, so it's kind of backwards. It's like condition, then the if. And then what it does is I have my condition. I've got my if, and then I have two different pieces of information, and they are separated with this colon right here. What's on my left is if that is true. If that is true is on my left. So if I, true. Oh my goodness. And then anything on the other side is false. So with a ternary operator, I've got my condition. This question mark is what initializes or sort of shows that this is a ternary operator. I've got my true statement. If it's true, then do this. And if it's false, do this. One thing to note with a ternary operator is that if you've got multiple things you need to do, if you have to do like, if it's true, then do this and this and this, then a ternary operator is not what you want to do, right? You just want to have an if statement. Ternary operators are really just sort of one line little pieces, one line little quick, efficient ways to do something. So again, if you've got multiple things you need to do, if a condition is true, then stick with the old tried and true if statement. But here, what I'm doing is I am setting up some conditions to say, okay, if, and remember, because we created this is my state, this is my getter, right? And initially I'm setting it to this. So I'm saying if movies, I can go in and my key of movie title and the length, when I say, remember when I say movies dot or my object dot key name, it returns my length or my value. I say if that length is less than 3. What that's saying is if the title is less than 3 characters, then I want to put in my class name with text danger, I want to say movie title is required. Or I could say something like movie title is required and must be 3 or more characters. That'd probably be better. It's probably going to make it look terrible, but that's okay. What I'm doing here is saying, if that's true, I want to go ahead and put a P tag with this class. Text danger is just from Bootstrap. It just makes it red. That says movie title is required and must be 3 or more characters. If it's false, don't put anything. Just empty. Leave it alone. So if I can get this up and running. Give me 1 second. I'm getting an error right now because I've got this guy. So I'm just going to comment. I'm going to delete these because we're going to change them anyway. Right now, I'm getting an error because it's saying, oh, set release year is not a thing, set tickets sold, because we've changed that, right? Now we just have it as this set movies, which we'll get to here in a second. But now you can see that automatically, because it's set to an empty string, now I get this warning. Now I get this warning. Now I could do the same thing here. Let's just go ahead and add in this to genre. Those are both characters, but instead I have to say genre, whatever I named it up here. And I say genre is required and must be 3 or more characters. The minute I save it, now all of a sudden we get these. If I go and type in more, it should, oh, I haven't updated state yet. So that's part of the issue. But right now, because I don't have any sort of values in there, it's going to give me this error. Now, if I don't want to do that, if I don't want it to sort of start with that because it's just empty, right? That doesn't make for a great example. I can do something like this. I can say movies dot movie title, meaning that if something's not in there, then just don't worry about it. So there must be something. So if I come back, you can see because I added that condition, it took that off. Like there must be some values. But if I press 1, oh, I'm not updating state, but if I press 1, once I update state, then now between 1 and 3 characters or 1 and 2 characters, basically, then I'll get my validation issue. But if it's more than 3 or if there's nothing in there, I'm not going to get an error. Reading through chat. Are there any questions on this? Any questions on this? Before we get started, or before we keep going, I want to go ahead and address, because obviously it's not going to work if I'm not updating state, it's not helping. Okay. Because, I need to update my state in order for us to even see that this is working, everything like that. So my good old trusty friend of GitHub Copilot is telling me already, I need a change handler, right? I need something that keeps track of what I'm changing it, right? We still need to follow the same process that on change, I want to update my state. We did it originally, we did it in our input itself, and we had that on change, and then we passed E, and then we had this, set release year, and we passed in the e.target.value. That's okay, that's fine, but there's a more efficient way, and a way that I think is better, in my opinion, that we can do in order to make it look much nicer and actually make it easier. And instead of having a bunch of these little built-in one-off functions, again, we want to have dry code. So I can build one function that handles and makes all the information, handles every single type of change. I don't have to write 4 different functions that do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say const change handler. Now this is what's just going to handle my change. I pass in an event because it is a synthetic event, right? Now what I want to do is I'm going to run this set movies function, right? This set movies, my setter. Cool. So I'm going to have a function. And here, what I'm going to do is, because I've got an object, I'm going to use my spread operator. And I'm going to take in movies, right? I'm going to take in this object here. The other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to do this target e.target.name, and we've already talked about e.target.value. So what is e.target.name? Well, in the same way, when we looked at our event object, we were able to say, okay, in my event object, there was a key of target. Within target, there was a key of value. And then we were able to extract the value from my form. Well, what target also has is a dot name. What this will do is it'll allow us to identify which input we're talking about and update our object accordingly. Now, there's something that's really important, and I'll show you this once I'll build it, and then we'll sort of look at it and show it. But something that's really important is for our event target.name for it to have a name, we also must name our input. We also must name our input. So here, something we're adding is a name to our input. Now, this name must match these values here. So here it's genre, it must be, or the name must be genre. Name must be release year, release year. What this is doing is this is saying set movies. Instead of having to do set release year, set genre, set movie title, this is saying set movies. We're using our spread operator to lay out all of our keys. And then we're saying we're matching the keys and saying, okay, movie title, let's set it to the value of whatever's being put in my input. So what happens is as this on change, as this, it's called change handler. I'm just going to put this in here and we can walk through it. As this changes, as this specific input changes, as I type in a title, what it's doing is it's running this change handler. And it's saying, okay, go, and I want to set movies. So I want to do my setter. I want to spread out these keys. I want to find the key in my movies object that matches the name of my input. I want to find the key in my movies object that matches the name of my input. And then I'm saying set that key, once we find it, set that value to whatever value is being inputted there. So what this allows is instead of having to have an on-change function for each individual input, I just have to pass in the change handler. And then regardless, as long as I've got my names on my inputs, it will go and update the key accordingly. Now, if I were to name this, if this was to accidentally be movie title, and I were to update, right, or I were to type in something, I would have a new piece of state. I would have movie title here because we've identified and said this is a title, or this is, sorry, a key. But remembering that within an object, if we try to assign a new value to a key that doesn't exist within an object, then it will just create a new key in that value. So then I would actually have two movie titles on accident. So we want to make sure that we are good and we are associated there. And there's a way that we can check as well. So I'm going to add these. I'm going to stop there. We just did a whole bunch of stuff. We just sped run through like 3 levels. I'm going to check the messages and see if our code is up and running. I've got an issue somewhere. Okay. Nope, I got an issue. What's it say? Let's try to debug this. Export may only appear at the top level, which tells me I had this error earlier. It means I'm missing something. I am missing. I did this the other day on accident. I couldn't figure it out. Because I'm missing this bracket here, right? I forgot to do this bracket. It is associating this bracket to this guy right here. So now what it's trying to think is, oh, I'm trying to export the movie within my movie function. And that's what's sort of breaking it. So all I have to do, very quick fix, is come here, fix that, update, and now we are good to go. And what we can see is, if I go to my components, go to my movie, we can see I've got these hooks for state. right? And if I say hello, we can see that my validations are currently working with, okay, it's empty, meaning, okay, don't say anything. But the minute I update and say, okay, there's only one letter in state, my ternary operator comes in. It's required, it must be more than 3. Same thing with 2. The minute I had 3, this is gone. So I can say Top Gun, action. We don't really, have any other validations yet, but this is 1,000,000 tickets. And we can see here that my state is being updated. Just so I don't confuse you, I want to point, okay, Chris, I do see your hand. I want to point to one thing. So I don't confuse you. If I accidentally did this and my names are now different, and I were to refresh and say, here's my hooks. Cool. And I say test. You see that it creates this new, this is what I was talking about. We'd have a new piece of state because movie title and movie title with a capital T are different. And so just like with an object, if we were to put, a key that doesn't currently exist, what a lot of languages will do is just say, okay, I'll just create it new. So if we ever see that, that's why this tool is really important when we're dealing with state, making sure that state is working correctly is when we use this tool and I go, oh, I should not have 2 of these. I must have a typo. So I can come here. Nope. Come here and then, oh, yep, I forgot to do this. And then now we're good to go. Okay. Chris, you had a question.
Yeah. So because of the way we use React and we have our separate components, there's never going to be an issue with using change handler for multiple different pieces of data because it's separated into different components, right?
Yeah, remembering that this is just a variable that lives only within the scope of this function.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not a global variable, meaning yes, you could have multiple components that have a change handler, and that's fine because change handler is only seen and existent within that function. And so if it doesn't know that there's an outside function, that's fine. That's okay. Okay. Any other questions?
Yeah,
Somebody asked. Go ahead.
Yeah, there are a couple questions in the chat. One of them was about the ternary operator.
Mhm.
And Ethan, if I'm saying this incorrectly, he's asking if the movie title will let you submit it with no data. Like, 'cause it looks like you put it with between 1 and 3 characters. He asked about that, and then Colette asked about the brackets, about the name. Like, why do we include brackets?
What was the last part? I'm so sorry.
Why do you include brackets for eTarget.name?
Because it's a key. So we're setting this key. So in the same way that if I had like a, some sort of object and I wanted to say that object's key, and you can put a bracket. So very similar, just to identify that this is a key.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, like if I were to have, oh wait, here's one. Like here, let's just say this, I'm just gonna take this guy right here. And say, Tom Brady equals this, right? I can say console.log Tom Brady, but instead of name, I could also put like this. And because it's a string, I put name here. And then this will console.log the value of Tom Brady.
Okay.
This bracket is because I'm saying that this is a key.
Oh, okay.
I'm going into my movies. I'm grabbing the key that matches whatever is on my name. So this value right here.
Okay.
Great question.
So name corresponds to the name in your destructed movie state there. Okay,
Mhm.
cool.
Yeah, so
Um,
these, so whatever is in here, if you want to do it this way, you can still do it the other way. This is just a second way to do it. Absolutely, you can still do it if you feel more comfortable doing the change handlers individually in here. You are welcome to do either way. Just wanted to show you another option that I think is a little more efficient. But if this is a little bit stressful for you, then either one works. So we're spreading out all of our keys here. I'm targeting the specific key that is in this name portion, this target dot name. Then I am, like if I were to console.log e.target.name. Let's see if this works. So if I'm just doing title and I say hello, and we look at this, we can see movie title. That is the name. I have 5 letters, so it has changed and done that 5 times. But that is the name of my input that I'm targeting. So we're taking this value and saying, okay, in this, let's target that key that is equivalent to this. Again, that's why if I have a typo, then it's going to create a new key because it's going to say that key doesn't exist. And then I want to set it equal to this value. So what it does is when it changes, it goes into this object, finds the key and updates the value that is being changed or the whatever's being typed.
Gotcha. Cool.
Jonathan?
And then Ethan's question was about the ternary. So Ethan, if I said your question correctly, if I'm not, or maybe explain your question a little bit more.
Oh, I see the question of, I thought he said the error will only appear in that. That's because I did it on movie title. I haven't done that on like if I were to do this.
Sorry, I was just wondering, like, so you have it where you can, the error only appears between 1 and 3 characters, right?
Mhm.
If you just click like add, well, I know you haven't set it up yet, but if you just click like add movie
Mhm.
without any data, would that like submit or no?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's the issue right now is that this ternary is great from a telling you what's wrong, but it actually doesn't prevent you from doing anything. We'll get to what we can actually do to prevent it here right after this. We'll move on to
Okay.
that validation. But yeah, so even if it shows, even if it's all in red, it still will allow for you, it'll still allow for you to submit it. This is just basically saying, if it's less than that, then show them that this is bad, but we're not doing anything yet. We're about to do that. Not doing anything yet to say, okay, we want to prevent bad data.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Great question. I think, Jonathan, you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I just had a question about the syntax with the set movies function.
Mhm.
So I understand when you use a spread operator with an object, it creates a copy of that object.
Mhm.
How is the comma working to show that we're trying to identify the target by name and then change its value?
Yeah, so that's a great question. That is part of the use state functionality that because there's a lot of functions that can take in different parameters, right? And based on the parameters that you add in, it can sort of change that, right? These are sort of optional parameters. That's why when we add in just set movie, that's okay if we just do one thing, or when we had the e.target.value. But as part of this, what it allows is for us to spread this out and then target this name and add in this value. So that's part of sort of how the set movies function is operates.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, of course. Great question. Really great question. I'm not going to add the ternary operator. The solution has it. I'm not going to add it for release year and tickets sold. Simply because I guess I can't, I have the solution up. I can just copy and paste it, but it does the same thing. Like I said, it doesn't actually change our ability to submit data. Unfortunately, what it does do is it just changes what it looks like. Shoot. Okay. So here's the last one. So now with our ternary operator, we are able to, if we refresh, perfect. And I say this, okay. I'm gonna say Top Gun. Genre is action, but you can see that that goes away. Release year is, if I say 1899, release year must be after 1900. But if I say 1901, that's fine. And then ticket sold, if I just say one ticket sold, I just put no way, at least 3 people didn't see it, must be more than 3. So once we get to 3, then we're good to go. So this is fine, but yes, we can add movie if we wanted to. And then if we console.log, it would still run that sort of submit function. And that's the issue, right? That we don't, just like Ethan was bringing up, we want to make sure that our data is safe. And so here's where we're going to add in a validation that we can do. Now, this might not be how we're going to do it fully for the rest of the class, because there's other tools that we're going to be able to bring in. But this is a validation of what we can do and how we can sort of handle this. So what we have the ability to do is create functions, right, and reuse them multiple times. And this is one way we can do it. If you wanted to mess with this function and have some sort of functionality to be a little bit more specific, you totally could. I just sort of wanted to throw everything in together. But if you wanted to, again, build this out differently, you totally can. So I'm going to say const movie validation. And this is going to take in an event, right? Because this is our event handler. Let's go ahead, before I already mess up, let's go ahead and put my little curly bracket. And what we're going to do is we want to do a few things. So here you can see GitHub Copilot already wants me to be able to spread things out. That's not what I'm going to do. What I actually want to do is I want to be able to tell, is my data valid? Is it valid enough for me to, if I was dealing with a database, send that through? Or is it broken? Is there errors that we want to prevent that from coming through? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let is valid. And that's going to equal true, right? We're just going to start that off like, okay, yes, we're assuming that it is valid. Now, again, this is where you could break it down to where you could say something like this. If you could do one individual per sort of, if you want to do movie.title and you want to do movie.genre, whatever. For the sake of today's class, I'm actually just going to do this, where I'm going to add in, I'm just going to do the or, and I'm going to say movies.genre. And because I have a movies object, I have to do movies dot. If you just put movie title, it's not going to know what that is. We have to go into that. So I'm going to say movie.genre, and you can see it already does it for us because GitHub Copilot is the GOAT. So what this validation is doing, this validator, if you will, is it saying, okay, if, so we're going to start with, yes, it is valid, it's true. But if movies, the movie title length is less than 3, or the genre is less than 3, or the release year is less than 1900, or the ticket sold is less than 3, which are all conditions that we've created up here, right? All conditions that we created right here. These are editable. We can change them. And these in theory could be different. We don't want them to be. There's no reason to, but that's what it's getting the data from. So if any of that is true, then I want to go ahead and change is valid to false. For our sake, I'm going to console.log and just say something like there is an error. Again, if you wanted to break that down and have multiple if statements, like an if, else, or if, else if, and really say there was an error with movie title, you totally could. This is just for the sake of having validations. Then we're doing that. Then what I am doing is I am returning return is valid because I've now changed it to false. It's no longer valid data. Return. Run. Return is valid. I can do an else that says return is valid. Console log no error, return is valid. So we can do that. That's fine. I believe if I would have just returned outside of that, if I would have just returned is valid, then it would have been either true or false, but this also works fine, right? We're right now telling ourselves there is an error or there's not an error. Perfect. Okay. How are we feeling about this? Any questions on this event handler? It is a lot. So somebody asked, so we can either use those validation methods or do we need both for everything to work? Nope, you don't need both. This is all you have to have in order to prevent your data from going when we get to it to database. All this is doing, and this is why I was even kind of like, I don't even know if I want to show you this. All this is doing is this is giving a message to the front end. That's it. That is all it's doing. Is it's just giving a message. If you didn't have this and you just ran this validator, then that would work fine. You would prevent your data. Just if your user was clicking and then they didn't know and they thought they were creating stuff or they thought they were adding movies and titles, then that could be an issue. Somebody said it's very different. It is. And I just, again, wanted to show you a different way to handle it. And so if this is confusing you, I'm very sorry. I thought, in my opinion, this makes more sense. It's more concise. It's dry because we're not redoing a bunch of set, things. We are just having one change event handler, and that's kind of how we'll move towards in the future. And then, okay, good. I'm sorry, Luis. I was nervous. I was like, oh gosh, I'm making you guys super confused. I think, and also that's the same thing. I feel like, in my opinion, this makes way more sense than having to keep track of all the states and doing this. The only wonky thing is this guy right here. If we, and when I first learned this was sort of like a, wait, what? Help me understand. But as we do more practice, this is what we'll be using. And so I think you'll get used to in working with this, but in my opinion, this is way easier than handling all of this or having a bunch of different things. Cool. Any other quick questions? Good. I'm glad that you guys are finding this more enjoyable. And I know that we are going to go over time because I do want to still talk about higher order functions, callback functions, map, filter, and for each. So we'll probably have a pretty good little class today. But we're going to implement this. And the last thing we will, so we're going to implement this validation, make sure that our data is running or not. And then we'll actually show it on the screen using map. So cool. So now that I have all that information and I have my validator, right? I have this, but you can see that it's sort of dark because we've created this. We're not doing anything with it. Does anybody have any idea of where now that I have this validator, where do you think it would be most efficient to put it? Anybody have any ideas? When would I want to check my data? When would I say, okay, I'm ready to validate and make sure? Exactly, Bear. It's going to be on our on submit. And we see that our on submit is our submit handler. So that's exactly where we're going to do that. That's exactly where we're going to do that. Luis, thank you for putting that in the chat. That is a very simple way to explain it. Yeah. So now that I've got my validator and I want to make sure that my data is able to be validated, what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that when it's submitted, because that makes sense. We don't want to preemptively be like, oh no, this doesn't work. We want to be able to show our data, or we want to allow our user to make sure to the form, and only when they press the button do they try to submit, and then we run our data first through our validator, and then we give it. You can kind of think about this validation as like a water filter. Kind of sounds like a weird thing, but first, you have like filtered like 6 or 7, 11 times, whatever, and it has to go through all of that before it comes to our tap and we can drink the water. If you're savage and drink from the tap, like me, that's what I do. But you have to run through all of these things to get out all the gunk and make sure, no, this is quality water. So we're doing the same thing. We're still going to do our prevent default because that is going to be the most important. We want to make sure that we do not lose our data. We are good to go. But then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say let. So there's a couple of ways. You can see here that this has an if statement, basically saying, so I'll do it this way as Copilot, and I'll show you the other way I have it. Okay, that's a dumb way. What this is doing is this saying is if, and then it's passing in this function. Now, Gray talked a little bit about it, and we're going to talk more about it. But this is a callback function. When we pass in a function into a function, this function is called a callback function. We'll talk more about that. I've got a whole sort of walkthrough of that here. But what this is doing is it's going to stop, it's going to run this function. And then this function, remember, either returns true or false. So what this is saying is if this is true, right? If what we get back is true, then here's what I want to do. Else it's false. So that's what Copilot was trying to do. I would have done, and this is sort of how I did it. So I'm going to comment this out. I'll comment it out and put Copilot version. I don't know why that's all. Okay, there we go. What I did is I said something like let is valid equal movie validation. So now I've got this variable called is valid. And actually, as I look at my code, I basically then do the same thing. I say if is valid. So in theory, this is actually more efficient because I now don't have this variable declaration. How embarrassing for me. Alas. So here, what I've got is a few different things. I am updating my data, and right now all we're doing is keeping track of our state because this is where we will use something like Axios to actually update our database. But right now there's a few things I want to do. If I currently add something in, let's see, if I say Top Gun, oops, I just put Top Gun. Then I say action, then I say 2022, and then 1,000,000, and I say add movie. Cool. I'm not doing anything with it right now, but you see that this data stays here, right? And that's not normally how a function works, or that's not normally how a form works. So one thing I want to do, one thing I want to accomplish is let's go ahead and end this. Let's go ahead and clear this out. Before I do that, let's actually see the data. So I'm going to say is valid movie validation. If is valid, I'm going to console log, and I'm going to say backtick movie. And then I'm going to say $. I'm just going to say movies. Now, let's go ahead and do this backtick. And I'm going to show you why here and just a cool little trick we can do. So what this is doing is this is going to console log. It's going to console log a string that says movie, and then it's going to get my movies because it's changed, right? And I've submitted it. So it's going to get this guy right here. So if I go to my code, I've got another issue. What did I do wrong? I don't have a, no, I do have a curly bracket. No, I don't. Curly bracket down. I think that's fine. Oh yeah, because that's my is valid. Yep. So I was missing a curly bracket. Now we're back to normal. Cool. So let's clear this. Somebody give me another movie I've done talk on like 18 times. Anybody have a dank movie?
Finding Nemo.
Finding Nemo. Finding Nemo. Genre. Fun. Release year. I don't know. It'll hurt my heart if I know, because that means I'm super old. Okay. And then all these tickets. Now, if I add this, you see, we get this no error, which is good. That means our validator worked, right? We had the information. We are good to go. Then, which tells us no error. Then we get this movie, and then we get this object. And that's kind of a pain. Sometimes whenever we are doing this, what it's giving us is sort of the location or just the type of that. And that is not an easy thing for us to do or to see. So what I can do is, here's a little tip. I can say JSON, which is JavaScript object notation, which is, these are objects. Stringify, string, stringify, and I want to stringify movies. Cool little tip and trick. If you just get this object, you do JSON stringify. We come here, we refresh. Somebody put Lilo and Stitch. And Stitch. STITC.
Will, could you explain that JSON stringify again?
Yeah.
And why
of
we
course.
did that?
Yeah. Yep. Thanks, Chris. So what this is doing is basically taking this object. JSON is JavaScript object notation. It is a very, very, very common thing to use. It's normally when we call APIs. We're going to talk about that next week. We're going to get a JSON object back. That is like mainly what you will use. All it is just an object in JavaScript, just in JavaScript. But the way we get it is sort of in an incorrect way, or in a very base way, where you saw that said object. And so what we need is something to basically interpret what that object is and spread it out, and not like a spread operator, but spread it out and stringify it. Say, okay, I don't want just this is an object of type object. I want you to actually take the values and make it in a string. So I want to be able to visualize exactly what that is. So that's what this is doing. Is JSON, JavaScript object notation, has a built-in function called stringify. So when we have this object, when we just get this object piece and we can't view it, we can run it through stringify, and we'll see that I can get kids, I don't know, 1998, and then this many. When I add it, now it took, whenever we just had object, we run the stringify method, and now it actually makes it into an object that we can see like a string.
Is that like the repr method, the REPR method in Python? Will?
Yeah, that's like so there's yes,
Cool.
exactly. In the same way that if you guys dealt with Python, sometimes you got an object or you get like an actual location back, and you could do like a repr to actually say, no, I want you to show me what's in it. I don't want just the object itself. Like sometimes it'll show it in memory. So I don't want the memory spot. I want you to take that object and I want you to run it through stringify or, repr. And what it does is it breaks it out and says, okay, they don't want the memory location. They want the actual value inside of that. Stringify is doing the same exact thing.
Learn something new.
There you go. So if you guys ever get object, you just run this little bit of code through that, and then it'll actually show you what is in the object, not just the object location itself. And you can look that up. Like if you just do JSON stringify. There's also a great little tool I have called grepper. It's just an extension. And then oftentimes it'll just bring up, if you have code questions, it'll bring up really common answers, but I'll put this in chat for you. Cool. So now we're able to take that data and we're able to see it, right? We're able to have that data. That's awesome, but that doesn't really do what I want. We remember, if you saw the end product, what we want to do is we want to be able to show that data. We want to be able to now keep track of it. Now, again, we're going to get to a point where we're using databases for this. So this is sort of a quick fix, if you will. But we want to be able to have this data, clear this out every time. I don't want to have to refresh. So if I want to store this information temporarily, or I want to sort of hold that information, what is a tool that I can use to do that? What have we been using to store some information to keep track? Exactly, Kat. I can use state. Right? There's no limit on how much state I can do. So up here, I'm going to say const. And I'm going to say movie. I want to have my list of movies. So I'm going to say movie list. And this is just going to be set to an empty list or movie, an empty array, right? I want to keep track. I want to have an array of my movie objects. And I want to keep track of that, which is awesome. So now I'll be able to visualize and see that. So now that we're here, we've made sure that our data is valid. Which again, you could have done this. This is way more efficient. Not more efficient, but this just gets rid of this line. Now that we've done that, what I can do is actually update and add that value to my movie list. Now there's a couple things, so let's talk about it here. If I'm having this movie list, what I'm doing is I'm saying set movie list. This is my setter. If I just passed in movies, it is going to continue to, oh, did I miss movie? Oh yeah, move list. How embarrassing, sorry. Thank you. If I just passed in movies, what that's going to do is it's going to continue to rewrite that value. And so movie list is just going to be the same movie. So it's going to be a movie. And then once I run this again, if I just pass it, it's going to overwrite. It's going to clear the old stuff. It's going to add, or it's not going to add, right? It's just going to continue to replace it in the same way that we have this guy currently, right? How these are sort of getting replaced over and over. If I use the spread operator to say, I want everything that's in there and go ahead and add this to it. We can't do like a dot push because this is a function. This is not a list, or this is not an array. But what it allows me to do is spread this out and say, get me every object in there. And what I will also want you to do is add this to it. So now if I'm here, I'm adding this, that should be good. If I come this way, I refresh. Cool. I'm going to go to my components. My movie. I want to see state. Now you see already in state, I have two things. I've got my genre, movie title, release year, tickets sold, and I have this empty list. So if I go to Top Gun Maverick, oh my goodness. Someone who types every day, you think I'd be way better at it. Action 2022, all of the tickets. What should happen is that when I press add movie, this state should get updated if I did everything correctly. So now I clicked add movie. We see that now I have added to this list. If I type in, give me another movie, somebody. Oh, I'm going to do Walter Mitty. It's my favorite movie of all time. Wholesome. AF. I won't do that. 2002 maybe? I don't know. And we'll just say, 55 tickets. People hated it, but I love it. If I add this, you now see that I've got this list that I'm appending to that has the two different options. I've got Top Gun Maverick, and then now I also have Walter Mitty. So now I'm able to keep track of this information. Again, we're going to use an actual database for this, but for right now, this is a really quick and easy way that I can keep track of this information and have multiple movies. I can continue to add to this. The minute I refresh this though, it's all going to go away. Any questions on this? I know we're 6 minutes over. If you guys have to drop, I fully understand. I'm going to keep going a little bit longer, maybe 15 or 20 minutes. So it is going to be a really long one. I'm so sorry. Or the other option is I can go over map and sort of higher level function stuff during our office hour next week. Totally up to you guys. I can go over map tonight because I want to finish this, what I want to show you, but would you guys prefer that I keep going or for the office hour, you want me to break down and do map filter for each higher level functions and callbacks? Keep going. Okay, cool. Yeah, a couple people. So Luis, yes. So that's what we're going to show now is how we're going to post it when submitting. Cool. So I've done this. Now the last thing I want to do is it is bugging me that we're going to still have this, or we're going to have it this way, right? Where even after I submit, things don't clear. So what I can do is I can actually just clear it myself, right? And GitHub Copilot's already telling me I can just do this. Cool. Now, if I save this, what I'm now doing is I'm resetting the values. We're already keeping track, so I don't need them anymore, but I'm going to reset the values to empty strings. So if I come here, I'm going to lose all my state, but I'll say Shrek 2001. Oh, wait, awesome. Awesome is not a genre, but that's okay. 2001 tickets sold that many. If I say add movie, whoa, what happened? Set movies, genre. We stringify. I'm going to actually do this. Sometimes with React, friends, my code is correct, I believe. I didn't do anything incorrect here. That's exactly what I'm supposed to do. So instead of me trying to pick apart my code, sometimes you just got to refresh and then go from there. Cool. So let's go back. Shrek. Humor. 2001 and ticket sold is 88. If I say add movie, that should change. Why is that not changing? Did I save my code? Yeah. It's adding here. I literally have the working code right next to me. It's got the same exact code. Movie title, genre, release year, ticket sold. Anybody see my issue?
Should we use like dot notation or something when resetting it?
And now my state's just acting wonky. See, now it's not even, oh. Well, that's good. That showed. Good thing. Sorry, I meant to show this. This validation, we see it. There is an error. And so what's good about it is it shows that our validation function is working, right? Because it didn't allow me to add the state because this year must be after 1900 or 1900 or later. Literally am unsure. Oh, I know why. Okay. Here's why. I am resetting the state. So if I look here, you can see that this is being reset, right? If I want this to be reflected, what I then have to do, is go into my inputs and add in one more piece. I just say value equals. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to say movies dot movie title. I'm going to do the same thing for each value. This one is going to be genre. This one is going to be release year. And this one is going to be tickets sold. Cool. So what it was happening is if I set this value to whatever is currently in state, when I refresh, it's going to do that, or when there's some sort of change. So now if I refresh this, cool, we see there's nothing here. If I say Walter MIDI, amazing. 2000, 2000, tickets sold 11. If I say add movie, we clear this. My state has now changed for that individual for my form. But then if I come here, I have access to my information here. And that is by me. That's just if I wanted to clear it, I just add this value in my input. And I want to value whatever the input is. So for this case, a genre, let's go ahead and do value genre. Okay. All right. Last thing I want to do. Is there any questions on that? Before I move on, we're going to talk about map for a hot second. I'll probably do honestly, I'll do an office hour next Tuesday and I'll go through filter and sort of higher level callback. I know Gray already did that today. So, but I'll go a little bit more in depth. But I'll sort of whiz through it today. Any questions before that?
If there aren't any questions, I just want to wait just in case there were.
If you have something
Okay.
great.
Yeah, so just in summary for those folks who are dealing with forms, which is similar, I think, with Python and Java. So you want to make sure that you add your name attribute and your value attribute. So, it's really important that you add that there. And then we're adding an on change, we talked about in office hour, we're going to be working with two events, handlers, on submit and on change. On change changes that it tracks the value that the user inputs. And then the on submit actually submits it. So we'll then get there to actual submission yet. Well, he technically did, but he's updating his state. So just, iterating that point that if your state's not updating, check your state. And if you're including the name and the value attributes in your form. So just want to hammer in that point.
Yeah. Thanks, Gray. Cool. Now, the last thing we're going to do is we're going to iterate through to where we can now see our list on the side. And in order for us to do that, we have to have an understanding of map. We're going to use .map. And I will talk more about this in office hour on Tuesday. But from a high level, what .map allows us to do is take an array of values, whether it's of objects or it's of just numbers, doesn't matter. And what it does is it will apply some function or something to, if we want to have an anonymous function, if we want to have an arrow function, it'll apply that to each and every number. So here, for an example, if I've got var numbers, right, here is my array. In this case, I have some. I can say numbers, which is my array, .map. I pass it in my anonymous function. This number is just a name. It could be unicorn if we wanted. And it returns to me this value here. So it's called a projection function with the item as the argument. So it is used as a for loop instead of me having to create that for creating a new variable called I or whatever we call it, putting my condition, putting my steps. What map will do is if I want something to be done to every single aspect or to iterate through every aspect of a array, I can use .map. I can use .map. Now there is another one that is called for each. Again, I'll talk really about the differences on this on Tuesday. Oops. For each will do the same thing, but it returns undefined. What map will do is it will go through and return a new array. That's the big thing between for each and map. Map returns a new array. For each returns undefined. Now they have different use cases for, when you'll want to use for each, when you'll want to use map. But that's really one of the big main differences. Map is what we're going to use most often. Again, there are use cases for each. We're going to use dot filter. Another big thing with map is with map, I can add on other built-in functions like dot filter, dot reduce. On for each, you cannot. So you can't chain. It's called chaining, like chain methods. You can't chain methods with for each. It is what it is. Map, you can. We'll talk in depth about those on Tuesday, but just know that what we can do is pass in this anonymous or an anonymous function, or an arrow function is what I'll use. We pass in what we need and then say, this is what we want you to do for each iteration. So it's going to do a 1, then 2, then 3, then 4, then 5, then 6, then 7. You can think about it from a high level as another for loop. So now that I know that I make sure I'm in the same. Yep. So now that I know about map, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to create a new div. These are in a row because I want them side by side. And what I'm going to do within my div, first I'm going to close my div. I don't know why JSX, I have noticed, oftentimes will not close a div, is I want to do some sort of JavaScript, right? I want to use this map, right? So it already knows what I'm doing. It's here. I want to iterate through. I'm going to take my list. In this case, it's this guy right here. This movie list. It's my list of movies. I'm going to pass in movie, and we'll talk about sort of this I and this key portion on Tuesday, because this is going to be important. If you get an error, you just add this key. You have to add this I and then this key. That's a common thing, but we'll talk more in depth because we're way too long now. I'm missing a curly bracket somewhere, or parentheses. Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to iterate through each object within my movie list. I have this movie, right? And that's what I'm calling each individual object. And then I actually don't want to return. So Copilot was very wrong there. Now, actually, it wasn't wrong. If I am going to do a curly bracket, you have to have a return. So if you, after your arrow function, do a curly bracket, you must have a return within your statement. On the flip side, if you just do a parentheses, if I were to get rid of this, this will implicitly return for you, meaning that it'll automatically return and you don't have to return. So that's just the difference between the two. Parentheses will implicitly return, so you don't have to put the return, but if you do curly brackets, it will. So I don't know what this is all bootstrap. I don't know what it's going to look like, but we'll see. But what I'm doing is I'm iterating through and I'm saying, okay, I want to map through, I want to iterate through all of my different objects. And it's going to take the first object and it's going to do all of this for the first object. So for my first movie in my list, it's going to say, okay, I want an H3 that's got my title, genre, blah, 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 blah. So let's see what that looks like. Cool. It already, well, that's pretty sweet. It did it for me. It did Walter Mitty. And then it said genre amazing, release year 2000, tickets sold 11. If I were to add another one, Shrek. Humor. 2001, ticket sold as 12. And I add movie. Now you can see that it automatically adds here because what it's doing is it's taking this list. Oops. It's taking this list of movies, movie list. We're iterating through, and for each object, I'm applying this. Everything within my parentheses. So it's creating a new card for each new card body with the title. And this is just some styling with the P tag and the H3 that GitHub Copilot did. I does stand for index. Again, we'll talk on Tuesday why that has to be there, what that means. But you just pass through index for map here. And then it should work perfectly. So now we have officially been able to, we are now able to add things. We have validation. So if I put, H, funny, everything else works. 2003 ticket sold was 45. If I try to add movie, notice it doesn't add it. And then I haven't done anything from a validation standpoint to say, okay, it only clears it if it's valid. I haven't done anything for if it's not valid. So that's why it stayed there. But if I go, oops, didn't mean to, I want to call that hitch. Now, if I add movie, it'll automatically add there. Okay. That was a whole bunch in an hour and 20 minutes. How are we feeling for those that are left, you brave souls that are still here? How are we feeling? Are there any questions? Did this also clarify and help with forms? I just felt like I didn't deliver the lecture very well yesterday, and I felt like there was some confusion. Did this help clarify some stuff for you guys? Did it help you sort of see, okay, this is how we apply it? Good. Good. Yeah, it's again, all of this is very important. Map, filter, for each. That's something I can cover in an office hour that is there. It's also, there's tons of information out there, but I felt like it was more important to really walk through change handlers, to really walk through a validation, even just the idea of, okay, I can have this method, I can do a few things, and I can store some information. Again, we're not going to store the information like this for the rest of the class, once we get to MongoDB and we start interacting with the database. But I wanted you to start getting familiar because, yeah, we're going to start doing more things like this. So I do hope that this helped. Yeah, I see a lot of tons of stuff I'm going to have to digest. Yeah, obviously you guys have the recording, or you will have the recording. You'll have this code. The other code's already up. It looks the exact same. So that solution is up there. So if you guys wanted to redo this or code along, that solution's already there as well. So. And then GitHub Copilot. Turns out it's a better developer than me because it's more efficient. I should have done that. But alas, here we are. Cool, friends. Any questions before I wrap this up tonight? I know we went super long. I'm really grateful for your guys' patience and sticking with me. Yeah, get alone. AI gets us once again. Except ChatGPT is getting kind of moody and I'm here for it. Cool. I'll go ahead and stop the recording here.